Connor, what's going on, man?
Not much. Just enjoying a beautiful afternoon here in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. We're going to go really deep today for everyone watching of how to plan your account executive territory. This is something Chris and I have talked a little bit about, but I wanted to bring Connor on, obviously because of his experience, 6+ years at Oracle, several different roles, but also recently went from being a manager back to being in the field as an account executive. So this is something you went through very recently. Mm-hmm. So I think the perspective of being at a market leader, I know some of the things we talked about before recording is like your ability to sell different product lines. These are things that there's no one size fits all answer, but I think this perspective is going to be really valuable. I guess I'd hand it over to you if you had any thoughts or want to set the stage for everyone watching today too.
Yeah, no, it's an important topic because I think anytime you take on a new territory, there's work to be done throughout the course of the year. But if you take the time to do your territory planning right up front, yeah, you might have to work extra, like work long hours, even weekends sometimes if you actually want to do it right, but it will end up saving you so much time over the long run and be so worth it. And yeah, like you said, I recently went back to the field about a year ago. And since then I've actually had 2 territories. So I've gone through this process twice, and there's definitely some things I've learned since the first time I was account executive, like going from SDR to account executive. Like what I knew about territory planning then has evolved since becoming an SDR manager, then going back to the field. So yeah. I think this is a good topic and a important conversation for anyone about to promote to the account executive role, or if you're new to the account executive role currently there, this will be a useful video.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe taking let's look at more recently, and then we'll also maybe later in the episode talk about if you're a first-time account executive. Mm-hmm. But I'd love for gearing this towards like active account executives or just SDRs planning ahead, right? You recently, you mentioned 1.5, 2 years ago, you transitioned back to account executive. I'll leave this wide open if it's not too vague. What are the first things you're doing in, say, the first 30 days to plan your territory and actually start making some meaningful progress, even if it's not closed won business?
Yeah. So the first thing I do is understand what my target is. I'll just use round numbers here. Like let's say I have $1 million quota. The first thing I do is try and get an understanding of where my dollars are going to come from. And again, this is unique to me, potentially. For some of you out there, I work at a big company where I have a territory where there's an existing install base. So part of my job is to grow and expand that install base, but also to go find net new customers. But the first one I focus on, because I think it's the lowest hanging fruit when you're in a new territory, is the existing install base. And going down a checklist of things I put together, like for example, who has renewals this fiscal year in my territory? Because at least where I work, there's usually an uplift come renewal to protect against inflation. This is pretty common in the SaaS industry. So again, round numbers, let's say they have a $100,000 contract up for renewal. Oftentimes there's like an 8% or a 10% uplift for that next 3 years. So that contract becomes 108K or 110K. And that 8 to 10K uplift is considered an expansion. And it's something that where I work, that goes towards your quota. So you kind of find these little low hanging fruit areas that a lot of them could be small and they chip away. Also come renewal time, it's a great time to look at how they're using the product. Like, do they need more users, or are there opportunities to cross sell into other product lines? And going down the list. So that's
I was gonna say, let me jump in there too. Those are all great points. Without maybe getting too specific, but that makes sense conceptually. What does that look like in reality? Is that running Salesforce reports to see who's using what, or like how are you actually getting down to this information and accessing that information as quickly as possible?
It's all in our system, and at Oracle we use all our own software actually, so it's not Salesforce. But those first 30 days, I'm heavy in the system looking at what's out there for dollars to capture for this year. And I look at what the lowest hanging fruit is in terms of renewal and expansion first. And quite frankly, that doesn't take that long because it's all in the system. The expansions, you start planning where there may be opportunities to cross-sell. Mm-hmm. But then the next area I look, again, not even leaving the system yet, it's what existing opportunities are going on in my territory. I want to jump on those as quickly as possible. There might have been a previous rep leaving, and a lot of times if you don't transition that well, a lot of customers get uncomfortable when they see something like that. Like they were working with a rep, the rep drops off. Some are better than other about communicating the transition, but a lot of times they take that like, oh, is this what it's going to be like working with them? Like they have a good cadence going and then it just drops off. So you're kind of jumping into a moving car sometimes, and you want to make sure you keep the momentum going. Yeah. So again, I still consider that low hanging fruit. And once I'm on top of renewals, where do I have opportunity to expand, get on top of the existing opportunities? Then I start to look for some of those either closed, lost, or just stalled opportunities where, again, in the system, like looking through the notes, and this is where it's sort of like, I think it requires a feel and a touch from experience of what you're seeing. Like, was this a legitimate opportunity or not? And if it was, or I deemed like, maybe in one case it could have been like, nope, they went with a competitor, they're going to be implementing the next 6 to 12 months. Like, that's probably not one. I'm just going to toss that one out, or look to like potentially create an opportunity there for something different. If not, if I deem it legitimate, like maybe they just didn't have the bandwidth at the time, and the last note is like reach back out in 6 months, and it's been 4 or 5 months, like I'm going to prioritize that engagement right there. Yep. So I try and focus on the lowest hanging fruit first, and those are what I consider like existing renewals, expansions, existing opportunities, and closed lost opportunities. I'm going to get on top of that first. Yep. Once I am, that's when I start looking at like, where can I generate net new pipeline? And that could be like, I'm sure we'll take the conversation there, but there's a lot of strategy when it comes to that.
I want to probe back into one time as well for SDRs or account executives right now, just trying to get inspiration for new ideas of where to find low-hanging fruit. Because I also find like, I think some of these, in a good way, I think it's worth restating, don't get me wrong, like closed loss opportunities, active deals in your pipeline. Those are very obvious low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. One of the things you mentioned I want to explore is cross-selling into accounts. We don't necessarily have to get down to the product name at Oracle as an example, but what are ways, and I'm just trying to spark ideas for people that are watching and listening, what are signals for you that they are ripe for selling another product into the account? Because I also have this where I work currently. Like, in theory, everyone that uses our core product would in theory benefit from having these other types of products involved. But also, let's say I'm a mid-market rep that has 500 accounts that have an install already. I'm not going to be able to reach out to all 500 with anything other than like, have you looked at our other products? Which is not going to get you anywhere. So that specific example of cross-selling into an account, what are signals you're looking for, or things that identify that, sure, in theory, any account that has bought something from Oracle could use another product, but what is a signal that's going to make you say, hey, they're actually very likely and a very good fit for something in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah. It's different for different companies and different industries. So one thing I do is I try and get the conversation set up as quickly as possible, just to introduce myself to the account and get a better sense beyond just what I see in the CRM and talking to the previous rep, like what they're telling me. And a lot of times it'll just be obvious, like they'll even lay it out for you. Other signals I look for, depending on what product they owned, we have like complementary products. So for example, we have like a core financial management suite that's more for like processes related to like general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, fixed assets, like core accounting processes. A natural next product we have it's called enterprise performance management is the category. It's more our product suite for the office of the CFO. So taking that core accounting data and using it to plan, budget, forecast, tax reporting, narrative reporting, like a lot of strategic planning using that accounting data.
And if I could ask there too, so are you setting up conversations by saying, hey, you're already a user of this is a complementary product, and doing more informational, like, I'm your new account manager, here's an overview of our products? Or like, how are you getting meaningful conversations in the ball rolling?
That's more, so like that's in my head how I come up with the idea that, like, based on what they own, and that's just one example, we have lots of complementary product suites to another. So I know in my head what I'm potentially targeting here. And then there's things you can look, like a lot of the companies I work with are public, so they have public statements, or they release, even if they're not, they're private, there's public press releases. So if I see a certain rate of growth, that they're growing as an organization, they're hiring headcount using things like Zoom Info to see if their headcount's going up. If they're making acquisitions, that one might be more unique to Oracle. Across a lot of our product suites, we have a very strong product. If you're a growing organization that's making acquisitions, our product's designed to maintain like a common data model, one common reporting structure. So it's looking for a lot of these signals that oftentimes I think are unique to the company you work at. Like, what is your value proposition? What is your product good at handling that's unique on the market? And identifying that. And there's either, yes, directly, if you can't find any information, like coming in with a hypothesis or a thesis as to like, this is the natural next step we see customers take, being more like consultative, like not just like asking like, would you be interested in this? That's never the way to do it, but more saying from a point of experience, and a lot of this requires preparation before the call, maybe even reaching out to internal peers. Have we worked with other companies in this industry? Like, we could potentially use them as references down the line. What was their next step after they started here? How did we get them to go from here? And then when you get on the call, using that reference as an example and starting to build the relationship, because I'm new to the account, I'm new to the territory. Like that, those are some, I come in with a hypothesis based on what I know about the account and what I can see online in our internal CRM, things like that.
Yeah, well said. No, I appreciate you diving into that, because I just want to get a little bit more granular there, because I think a lot of people on the surface can identify it, but actually creating that conversation, actually trying to get a meaningful opportunity is a little bit different and nuanced of a thing. So yeah, solid stuff.
It takes time sometimes too. Like maybe this is just my style. I don't always try and force that on the first call. I try and like plant the seed and create the relationship with them, like give stuff to them before our next meeting. Like I like to set up, if I can, like either bi-weekly if they're open to it, or monthly cadences. And in the interim, just send them like, not asking for anything in return, like just thought this would be useful for our next conversation. Perhaps we can discuss, like either it's some article that came out or some free events that my company's hosting that could be relevant to them, just showing them that I'm thinking of them.
Yeah.
And maybe we could get into it. I do strategically keep lists of like key personas at all my accounts, so that when I do see these events pop up, I can just create one email template, like replace their name. And it's just a good way to like keep the relationship going, but at scale. Like it feels personal to a lot of them, but in reality, they don't know this, but like they're in an Excel column with like 20 other VPs of finance that I'm going to send that same email out to.
And is that's a good topic as well, that list that you're building, just trying to get a sense for like muscle memory. I'm sure no one size fits all, but we kind of talked about the first 30 days ish, some of those low hanging fruit. When you're getting down to the contact and account level of like the actual people in the account, is this something you're also doing as part of that first 30 days? Or is that more maybe like month 2, month 3, as you've made sure you've gotten a pulse on everything, all the low hanging fruits, now later in you can start to get down to the individual person level? I'm just curious how you think about it.
For the existing install base, existing opportunities, I'm doing that as quickly as I can. Like in the first 30 days, I'm not waiting for that. I know how to prepare for those calls, and it takes a lot of work up front, but I want to be doing that as soon as possible, because I don't want them to go 2 to 3 months without hearing from their Oracle account team member. Like that could risk just coming off net, especially if you had an ongoing engagement and they don't know, like a lot of times they don't understand, like we can't do much about these internal rearrangements sometimes if like you're a new rep taking over territory. It's not like we were trying to ignore you, but you have to always be putting yourself in the customer's shoes. Like if they had conversations going and then Oracle or wherever you work goes quiet for 3 months, that could be perceived the wrong way. So that stuff I try and get on top of as quickly as possible. Once that's when I start to spend more time on like, okay, what else is out there? Like to generate new pipeline. Yeah,
for sure. And if it's a good place to transition to, so I think that's a really great point to start. Correct me if I'm wrong here and summarizing incorrectly, but basically the low-hanging fruit, active opportunities, closed lost opportunities that, there's actually a chance you could revive it, not the ones where they, went with a competitor 3 months ago. You mentioned some of the cross-sell opportunities and other ways that you're looking at accounts. You start to break down the active opportunities by the names, and actually like kind of doing a little bit of an org chart creation to track that down. Now, as we get into, call it, I don't know, day 30 to 90, or maybe just the first half of your first 6 months in a new territory as an account executive, how are you building upon that? Anything else you would add, or like what's kind of the next step when you're getting just beyond this initial deep work of identifying low-hanging fruit?
So this is where I start tiering accounts in my territory, and the way I've always done it, and I'd love to hear how you do it too, because I still feel like I'm learning in this process and I see a lot of different ways account executives organize their territory. I usually tier it, like call it either A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3. I have 3 categories. Category 1 is what we just talked about, like that low-hanging fruit, the quality stuff. Category 2 is where I identify my top accounts, and there's certain things I look for. Some of them are specific to Oracle. A lot of it is like, is there a real use case here, and is there budget? And depending on where you work, like in enterprise where I am, basically every company in my territory has the budget on paper. Like they are big enough to afford our service. So I more look strongly for the use case, and there's other things I look out for that could. So I talked about some of them, like, are they making a lot of acquisitions? Are they growing fast? What is that rate of growth? Is their employee headcount going up at a faster pace? And like, what is that rate of growth from a head point? Because we also sell an HR platform that is designed to help companies that are scaling from a people standpoint. But then there's other things, like I sell our cloud application suite. Oracle, it's been around for a while. I think it was in the 70s. It started in the on-premise software days. So we have multiple on-premise products that are still out there that are like 20 years old that a lot of customers just haven't moved off of. I'm starting to identify who's on that, like who have renewals coming up in those products, and is now, those are usually good targets for me to reach out to. That's like something could be unique to where I work. Not every company has like old legacy customers on some old SKU versus some new SKU.
And just to clarify, you're trying to upsell them to like a newer, maybe cloud-based version of their on-prem thing or something like that?
But it's a totally different cloud application suite, and we're selling them the cloud model. But those are the things those are the use cases I look for, and I put those in my B category or tier 2, whatever, I'll call it tier 2. And my goal is to get some active engagements going there and move them to the tier 1 category. But I identify all the accounts in my personal territory. It's like 300 accounts. So this just, again, after I'm on top of the low hanging fruit, this just requires work. I'll do the upfront work, get up early, work late, get this done, work weekends if I have to go through every single account individually, identify which ones have strong use cases that we're typically a fit for, and they're going in my tier 2 category. And then every other account beyond that I didn't immediately identify a use case for, and they didn't enter my tier 2 category, I just put in the tier 3 category. And this is where I work with, like, we have SDRs and BDRs at my company. So I'll work with them on messaging and like help me scale the territory, because I don't have the time at first to reach out to all those accounts. So I want to get the SDR equipped with good messaging, help them understand, and this requires coaching and teaching. Maybe this coming from the SDR manager role, like this is just something I naturally gravitate towards, but I'll have them focused on my tier 3 accounts while I focus all my time on those tier 2 accounts with the strong use cases.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that usually takes up the rest of that, like 60 to 90 days. And then from there, we're just iterate. Some of those tier 3 accounts, sometimes I just misidentified, didn't see the use case, because I'll talk to anyone. I just want meetings after that. But a lot of times those tier 3 companies, they actually do have a really good use case and they move right up to tier 1. So I want the SDR working on the stuff I don't immediately have time for in the beginning, or it's just not like the highest ROI activity for me. I want them focused on that. I'm going to focus on those tier 2s and obviously staying on top of the tier 1 low hanging fruit. And that's how I've looked at it. I've seen lots of other ways people handle it too. I'd be curious if that's in line with your experience.
No, that aligns quite a lot. Just a couple clarifying questions. So you mentioned the tier ABC or 1, 2, 3, however you prefer. So I do a similar thing. I'm just curious, roughly like numbers of accounts in each of those buckets. Are we talking 5, 10 accounts in the A, B, and C, or are we talking like 20 to 30 to 50?
Yeah, it can depend. I mean, I'd say in that tier 1, there's generally like 20 to 30. It's the smallest bucket by far, but it's the highest quality. Tier 2, like that depends on the territory. Like usually there's maybe 50 to 75 accounts in that bucket that are worth, like that I've quickly identified as that's worth me being really strategic and trying to break into these accounts. And then the rest I put as tier 3. So the bulk of it is actually in tier 3, and I'm spending my time on the accounts where there's lots of things, and this just with experience, you get better at identifying some of those use cases. Like another one is there new leadership in the account, and do they have past Oracle experience? You like look on their LinkedIn for little keywords, like some of those on-premise applications, or there's little things you can look for where I'm like, those are good, historically have been good buying indicators, and I've found it worth to go the extra mile for those types of accounts rather than just bucketing them all in the same category, but happy to take meetings from those tier 3 accounts and get something going. Because a lot of times, they were tier 3 accounts for a reason. We got them on a meeting and nothing was there. Yep. But sometimes you get surprises. So that's kind of just the way I've looked at it.
No, I like that a lot. I think contrasting that with what I do, I look at it more, and maybe I haven't asked enough questions, so correct me if you do this differently. So it sounds like the way you do your ABC is basically your entire territory for the full year. Because the reason I bring that up is I do it a little bit different, and this is just kind of what I learned from a manager I really enjoyed. But we, or at least I, typically have 10 in my A, 10 in my B, and 10 in my C, and it's a real forcing function to say, A is pretty much exactly what you're talking about, active opportunities, and if I have more than 10 active opportunities at my time in the enterprise and strategic side, it's the highest long-term value opportunities. So even if it's like a land, but there's a $500,000 expand on the back end of that, that would be a tier A for me as an example. It's not just immediate dollar amount. B is probably going to be a few active opportunities, and then probably some of those closed, lost, or cross-sell opportunities that haven't materialized yet, but very well could be in the future, right? Like someone who's grown 50% year over year with their spend, they've maxed out what they can do on one product, but if they've adopted so much of that, it makes sense to sell another one, even though there's not an active opportunity. That's a B for me. And then same thing with C. I think we think about this similarly but different, but I pull, there's really either super small deals that are very transactional in the C or no deals at all. Most likely all of them are no active deals in the C category, but they're the most realistic based on intent and signals that I feel like within the upcoming quarter, I might be able to strike up a strategic conversation. And then let's say in the example that I had 300 accounts as well, the remaining 270, I would certainly work with my SDR to get them on those accounts, but I kind of give them a little bit more leeway to say, hey, these are my 30 for the next quarter that I'm going to go into. Literally everything else is fair game. Or if you see a free demo or a white paper download of any of these, let me know right away and I'll make sure to give you credit on that opportunity. Yeah. But I would just say, again, I think it's interesting because we think about it very similarly. And the way that I think about it, I'd be curious your feedback on as an account executive. Just being honest with myself, not based on my intentions, but based on the actual results of me, as an AE. Once you get a full pipeline, once you have a ton of active deals you're managing, I've found, for me at least, that about 30 accounts is that sweet spot of realistically how many accounts I can actually genuinely do very thorough SDR type of work to try and even break in the first place. So that's how I do it, is kind of like a rolling. I do 30 on a quarter by quarter basis, and then pretty much every month or two I'm updating that list based on the opportunities that I have. And for instance, I may have exhausted all the contacts at a B or C account, so I just knock them back out into the pool and I bring in another one, or maybe I promote a C and then bring in a new account to the bottom of C as an example. So
I do think we think about this pretty similarly. And I guess I'll clarify, my tier 1 accounts and the ongoing opportunities, that's always priority number 1. The purpose of the pipeline generation is to get a quality pipeline filled. If I determine, and part of this comes through experience, I guess, and understanding, because sometimes you have a full active pipeline, but a lot of these aren't strong sales cycles. But if I have what I deem a good quality pipeline, I'm making sure that gets full attention first, because that's the revenue's there. If I have the full quality pipeline to get to my revenue targets, I'm focused on getting those across the finish line before going and prospecting into my B accounts. So usually on that, I'm focused on for me, I'm usually running anywhere from 5 to 10 sizable active opportunities at any given time. If they're strong, I'm going to make sure to spend the extra effort doing everything I can to get those across the finish line. And again, for me, this is still almost a gut feel. I'm still working on the science of this sometimes, but I can just tell this isn't this quality pipeline. That's when I'll use the extra time then to start trying to see what's out there in my B accounts that I've determined have good use cases and try and see if any of those I can pull them into the tier 1 category.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe I'm sure we could keep riffing on this. So one, if I haven't covered anything, cut me off. Maybe working towards a close. Two, I'm curious how you think about going on site, actually visiting customers. I know that's much more common at the enterprise level than maybe SMB and mid-market. But do you put any personal goals, whether it's once a month on site or in the field or at an event or anything like that when it comes to visiting customers?
Yeah, I try and get out there anytime I can. Sometimes it comes up to approvals, but I think that's a differentiator. Like if you can get out there and meet them. My territory is all over the country. Like I don't have a specific geography that I cover, but sometimes it's, if there's an active engagement and it makes sense to go out there, like I'll go out there. So sometimes it can be multiple times a month. Sometimes I don't even travel that month if I don't have an engagement. Usually at Oracle where I work, like the demo is usually the first big time you get out there, and then from there you start building that relationship throughout the rest of the sales cycle at like different events and things like that. There's always events being hosted all over the country too. So this year in particular in my new territory, there's a lot more travel, which I personally enjoy. I think that can be the differentiator when you win deals, because a lot of competitors, they don't do that. They don't go out there.
Yeah, 100%. And then also maybe for someone like, it's interesting because my current role, I mean, I've been here for 2 years now, so this is like back when I started. They put much more of an emphasis on visiting customers than any company I had worked at before. When we're talking about the first 30 to 60 to 90 days, going on site, even if it's for one day, is usually a 2 to 3 day effort, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got a day more or less of travel, the back and forth there, it just takes away time from like the main thing. So is there any type of criteria you use when saying like, hey, this justifies the time to actually go visit someone, when otherwise, if this is too small of a deal or this is too early on in the cycle, my time is better spent organizing my territory? Any thoughts on that?
And a lot of that is decided by the company I work for too. Like there are thresholds, but usually, it's deal size, where we are in the opportunity, like what relationships do we have within the account, or do we have relationships with the actual economic buyers, like the decision makers, or do we have some mid-level manager that's all excited about the platform? Like and a lot of that is just an internal conversation, because it's not just me most times when we're traveling. There's a team of solutions engineers that's supporting the deal, there's management, so it's usually like a group discussion on whether this one is worth, because there's always different deals we could be traveling for, so we're deciding which ones are the most valuable, where would this really add value to the deal cycle, how big is that deal cycle, thinking about where we are in terms of quota attainment and our revenue targets. It's usually a group conversation around like variables like that.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's great perspective, and I think if nothing else, like the whole purpose of walking through this was to give people ideas and just things to like recheck, because also even as an account executive, like I feel like I go through a full year and then my territory changes and I have to like go back and rethink like, what should I be checking, right? Because a lot of times you get that put in place, you have the reporting, and or you've just got a full pipeline. So admittedly, you might get a little bit lazy, because if you just focus on this pipeline for the last quarter of the year, you're going to hit 150% of your number. So you kind of let your guard down. But anything else that comes to mind or that I missed that you feel like is worth throwing in?
I think one other key thing, and again, this is just me speaking from my experience in the type of products we sell. We have like big transformational type products that are expensive. They are expensive not just on an annual basis for a cloud subscription, but to implement, it takes a lot of time. So another key factor I think about is, where are we in the year? So where I work, June 1st, it's weird, is actually the start of our fiscal year. So by the time the viewers, you guys are watching this, it's probably like my Q2. So usually in that early part of the year, I'm more focused on trying to find those more transformational deals out there, because if we get to Q4 and I'm trying to pull in some big transformational deal that's going to get halfway to my number, I'm not going to be able to start that from scratch in Q4 and have it close in time. So I think about where we are in the year. In the beginning, I think about more those longer sales cycle transformational opportunities I can generate, trying to go find those. And then as we get towards the end of the year, our fiscal year, is when I start thinking about more, where can I find transactional stuff that I can, like, that can be a 1 to 3 month sales cycle, where the transformational stuff is often 6 to 12 month sales cycles. And then there's little things you can think about too, like year end. A lot of customers have, like, they create their budgets in that, like, they start having the conversation September, October, November for what their next fiscal year, because most of them operate on a normal calendar year. So they're planning for their next year's budget. So you're trying to get in, like, from a timing perspective before, like, as they're having those conversations, and get things penciled in. So there's little things throughout the year. Like, I sell into a lot of finance people. A lot of times the end of month is not a great time to be reaching out to them, because they're closing the books. It's like a very stressful process to them. But a lot of account executives, they don't take those little details into account. So that's the only other thing I'd add is like something I've been trying to do more. I don't think I did that my first 2 years as an account executive, like where that was 4 years ago when I went from SDR. That wasn't on my radar. Those are some of the little details I'm trying to optimize about my territory planning this year that I haven't done in the past. Is where are we at in the fiscal year, and where is the customer at in theirs?
Yeah. No, this is great, man. I think those are all great insights too. Aligning to buying cycles for all those different reasons. I know early on, I hate to do this to people, but I said we'll probably talk about that transition from SDR to AE. I think we should honestly make that a separate episode and dive deep into that, because there's so much. I mean, this would turn into like an hour and a half. So for everyone watching, this is really great. Connor Murray also has a YouTube channel linked in the description. Highly, highly recommend checking that out. And just calling out too, he is a part of the higher levels team, and we actually have an AE mastery community as well, where we do have top performers at AWS, Snowflake, Rubrik, Outreach, et cetera, that are in there as well. So by all means, like if you enjoyed this and are just looking for great podcasts on YouTube, we'd appreciate a like and subscribe. But obviously you're welcome to check us out at higher levels, where there's communities, live coaching, all these different things. But Connor, great episode. Any other thoughts before we call it?
I don't think so. I think we I got everything off my chest.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. All right, thanks guys.
Thanks,
See you on
everyone.
the next one.